Today we're doing a pre-delivery flight check on an A22LS Foxbat with a 100 horsepower engine, a Tyabb prop and control sticks here. We'll go through a pretty standard checklist of things we just want to test out and check on the aircraft to make sure it's flying correctly and that it seems to be pretty well okay before it's delivered to the customer at the weekend. We've obviously done all the pre-flight checks already, so the startup procedure, make sure both fuel tanks are on in this case. Yep, flaps are up, we've checked all of that. And now we're going to go to carburetor heat cold, cabin heat cold. We'll switch on both ignitions. We won't use the cold start choke because the aircraft has already been running this morning. Put the part brake on, which means basically putting the one-way valve and squeezing the lever there so that we've got the part brakes on. Controls are full and free, but we've checked that already. Okay, we'll just close the door down. Clear prop. Okay, the engine's started up nicely. It was running on its retard startup, as the Rotaxes do now, at about 1600 RPMs, now idling at 2100. We'll just let the engine settle down. Landing light on, intercom is on, we don't need nav lights, it's bright day. And the trim is set roughly midway between the centre and the bottom for takeoff purposes in this aircraft. Ignition's on, remove the part brake and the aircraft will start to move forward. Check the brakes are okay. Yep, all is good. Traffic Tyabb Foxbat 8624 is taxiing for runway 17 for a local flight to the east. Traffic Tyabb. Now this aircraft is fitted with the optional wheel spats over the standard sized wheel, and so you'd expect the speeds might be a knot or two faster than the aircraft without wheel spats. But we'll see once we get some official figures here. The indicated airspeed's probably going to be something in the region of 5 to 6 knots lower than the true airspeed because of the air temperature and the heights we'll be flying at. So when we have a look at the dial, what we can do later on is calculate the true airspeeds based on air temperature, actual air temperature at the time. Okay, we're just pulling around here to do the engine run-up check, and so park it there, put the part brake on, make sure it's squeezed up a couple of times, choke is fully back, both are fully on here, temperatures and pressures are all off their stops and going okay. So now we'll just rev the engine to 4000 RPM, gradually increase RPM to 4000 RPM, make sure the aircraft is holding on the brakes, which it is, so we're bang on 4000 RPM there. And we'll check first one ignition, drop is about probably 100 to 150 RPM, check the second one, about the same, and we'll check the carburetor heat. I don't expect it will drop much on the carburetor heat because the carbs are density compensating. Yeah, it's dropped off maybe 50, 60 RPM, something like that. Put the carb heat back cold again, and it goes back up again. All T's and P's are all okay. Okay, so we'll back off on the throttle there, and the idle is somewhere around about 1500, which is where we want it to be. Now, when you're sitting here like this, Rotax recommends that you idle between 1800 and 2200 to look after the gearbox and the engine. Okay, well, we're about to turn around and go down to the takeoff area, so just make sure that the controls are all full and free. So we have complete controls there, they're all full and free, no problem at all. Try full flap and make sure the controls are still full and free, which they are, and then we'll set one stage of flap for takeoff, which is the middle position there like that. Okay, now we just try the 360-degree turn, the brakes are all working okay, that's full right rudder. We're still really just on idle speed, 2000 RPM here. Make sure the aeroplane goes all the way around. I can't hear any nasty clonks or funny noises. The rudder pedals feel perfectly okay. Hear anything wrong with it, feel anything wrong with it, everything's okay, just put the brakes on. In fact, it's an interesting point to note that this aircraft's got standard size wheels on it, which are effectively about 15 inches in diameter overall on 6-inch rims. And the brakes work that bit better because there's less leverage from the wheel to the brake. aircraft with bigger tyres like the Tundra tyres or the 600x6s, which are about 17 to 17.5 inches in diameter, require a fair bit more pressure on the brake pedal to get them to work properly. Anyway, we're just going to wait here at the holding point. There's an aircraft coming in to land, so we'll just wait for them to pass by before we take off. Tango November Victor, I think it's one of the school aircraft here at Tyabb. Traffic Tyabb Foxbat 8624 is entering and lining up runway 17 for a short flight to the east. Today the wind is pretty well straight up and down the runway. Earlier on there's quite a lot of crosswind and it's just gently bobbing from side to side at the moment, so nothing serious. Okay, we'll time the takeoff from wheels rolling to 1100 feet. Let's go.
Traffic Cessna 152, Tango November Victor, clear runway 17. Alright.
It's interesting, there was, once we got about 50 to 100 feet off the ground, there was a real tug on the tailplane there as we just lifted up into the crosswind. And as we approach 1100, I'll level off. There we go. Okay, that's exactly a minute and a half from wheels rolling to reach 1,000 feet above ground level. Temperatures and pressures are all okay, and flaps away. We're just cruising out over the water over here where it might be a little bit smoother. We've got about 4,700 and an indicated between 85 and 90 knots indicated. And we're about to start our climb from 1,100 feet up to 3,100. Remember, this is all height above surface that we're looking at here. We'll just climb over the water. It's much smoother over the water here. Okay, we are at around about 1,100 feet. No flap on there. We'll just apply full throttle and start climbing. So we'll just wait for the second hand to get down to the bottom of the hour, as they say, at 6, and then we'll just do a rough time climb to 1,000 feet. Best climb speed in these A22LS is around about 62 knots. Best angle of climb if you're going for obstacle clearance is around about 57 knots. So keep the ball in the middle. Got around about 62 knots on the ASI. Just climbing slowly but surely. We're getting an indicated 700 feet a minute, which is not bad for a pretty heavily loaded aircraft on a reasonably warm day. Just the forecast today for the area was 25. And here we are, another 100 feet to go above the surface, 60 odd knots. As we come up to that 3,100 foot mark, so far it's taken us 2¼ minutes to do that 2,000 feet. The oil temperature at the top of the climb has nicely come up to about 95, something like that, which is quite good. Okay, we're going to now move into stalls. So we'll do a no flap stall, a single notch of flap, and then full flap stall just to see what the speeds are. Okay, we'll just do a clearing turn to make sure there's nobody around here. It's usually pretty empty, but it's a good idea just to have a little bit of a check to make sure that we are here up here. Beautiful day, the tide's out and the channels down the bay here can easily be seen. They're just lovely. Okay, I reckon we're all okay. We've been listening to the radio and we haven't heard anything there. So we're about right for a stall here. Put the ball in the middle. Now the Foxbat usually, and I haven't tried this one yet, usually has a little bit of a jiggle on the stick when it stalls. It just gives a little head shake from side to side. So we've got carburetor heat hot. We'll gradually back off on the power. Keep the ball in the middle and just gradually ease back on the stick and note at what speed it stalls. Indicated so far 35, there we go. Okay, so it didn't really nudge the stick very much at all. At 35 it just did a gentle little stall there. It's mushing down at 500 feet a minute, so we'll just pick up the speed again and get back into the climb. Make sure we're all okay there. We'll leave the carby heat on for the moment. Okay, right, we're back on an even keel again. We'll put on one stage of flap. We're below the flap limiting speed of 83 knots, so we've got one stage of flap there, and we'll do the stall again. So gently pulling back on the power. It's stalled at 35 with no flap at all. We're now gradually eased back. We've got idle power, maintaining height. Down at 35, 30, about 32, 33, something like that. So that's not too bad at all. Bit of nose down, pick up the speed. We'll turn around and get away from this built up area just under the nose, stay out over the bay. And you can see the height loss in both those stalls has only added up to about 100 feet in total. So we're back on an even keel now. Just turn around gently and we'll do a full flap stall and see what speed that's indicating. Now we'll put the full flap on here, and once again pull back on the power and just maintain altitude and make a note of the stall speed. It slows down much quicker when there's a bit of flap on there like that. And come on, just won't stall. We're getting a sort of a nodding down at anything around 30, but we'll try it again. Yep, it's just nodding its head at just under 30 there. Right, I'll just jot those figures down. Yeah. Right, now we're going to do turns through 30 degrees and 60 degrees of bank, just to make sure that they're all okay. So we'll do a gentle left turn first, which will be a 30-degree turn. 30 degrees is about there, like that, if the GPS is to be believed. There certainly doesn't seem to be any problem with the turn. It just, if you take your hands off the controls, it pretty well stays there. And we'll do another one, so we'll transit from 30 degrees left to 30 degrees right, which is this way, like that. And again, seems to be the transition was okay, no funny bumps, no funny feelings in the controls or anything like that. Okay, so we will we'll steepen this turn to 60 degrees. That's turning nicely on a sixpence. Once we go through the sun, then we'll transition to a turn full the other way. And again, just running the nose round the horizon, ball in the middle, no height loss, no height gain, and roll out. So turns each way are perfectly okay. We're now going to climb to 3,000 feet and then do a gentle dive to see if the aircraft reaches VNE okay. It's reasonably smooth up here, so we shouldn't have any problems with it like that. Okay, now the Foxbat's a lot draggier than the other aircraft we market, the A22 Vixen, so it may take a little bit longer to get to the VNE, but what we're going to do now is gently push the nose down, watch the ASI as it comes up, and then we'll do a gentle recovery. Okay, we have VNE there, and not wishing to pull the wings off the aircraft, back off on the throttle and gently assume height. We're now going to descend to 1,500 feet and do some cruise speed checks. Okay, now the idea is to let the aircraft stabilize at 4,800 RPM. So we've got pretty well straight and level already. Might need a little bit of trim to keep it going nicely. 4,800 RPM just coming up. Okay, well we're getting something, my guess would be around about 85 knots at 4,800. We'll bump it up to 5,000. Just wait for it to stabilize. It takes a few moments for the speed to gradually pick up. I'd say we're getting around about 90 knots at 5,000, 5,200. Remember, these are indicated speeds, not true air speeds. Straight and level, yeah, I reckon 92 to 93 at 5,200 RPM. And now maximum RPM, which is full engine RPM. We're getting 5,500, which is about what we should do, which is maximum continuous. And the indicated airspeed is somewhere in the 90 798 category. You might argue a little bit faster, but I'd say 97 to 98 indicated. Right, well, we'll return and go and do a little bit of an approach and landing. Traffic Tyabb, Foxbat 8624 is approximately 3 miles to the southeast, inbound to join downwind for runway 17, Traffic Tyabb. Traffic Tyabb, Foxbat 8624 is over the steel sheds joining downwind for runway 17, Traffic Tyabb. Okay, we're about mid downwind for Tyabb. You can see the cross strip very clearly there. Okay, well, it looks like the wind's still pretty well straight up and down the runway and around about 5 or 6 knots. Nothing too serious there. We're reaching the end of downwind now. The airfield is about 45 degrees behind me, so we'll put the carb heat on, throttle back, and begin our turn in. Traffic Tyabb, Foxbat 8624, turns base 17 Tyabb. Stick on one stage of flap now for the base leg and try and get the speed stabilised in the Foxbat at around about 55 to 60 knots. Always important to make sure that the throttle is pulled fully back on the Foxbat. Sometimes just the tiniest trickle of throttle can make a big difference to the landing and the approach. So we got around about 55 here on base leg, checking up final to make sure nobody's there. Put on full flap there and adjust the trim accordingly, and now we turn in onto final. Traffic Tyabb, Foxbat 8624 turns final, runway 17 full stop Tyabb. We've stabilised on around about 50 knots here. Remember, the aircraft takeoff weight when we left was around about 555 kilos, so it's only 45 kilos below the maximum takeoff weight. So we're well down final now, carburetor heat cold, and we're nicely lined up. Pretty steady 50 all the way down. We may need a little bit of engine just to get us in there, so I've pulled it back to about 45. Yes, down in the still air the plane begins to drop like a stone, so we'll give it a little bit of power just to arrest that descent, and then once we're across the road can let the aircraft just come down nicely. A little bit of crosswind but nothing serious, and then it's just a case of holding it until it settles nicely on the runway. Okay, there we are. So what the touchdown speed was around about 35 knots, and coming down final varied between around about 50 and 45 knots. Okay, so here we are. We can turn off at the first exit here on this runway is between 150 and 200 meters from the threshold of the runway. Traffic Tyabb, Foxbat 8624 is clear of runway 17 Tyabb. Okay, there we are. So we've pretty well completed the flight test now. All we've got to do is go down through the shutdown procedure. So I set the throttle at around about 2000 RPM. Well, for the purposes of this test, I'd normally turn the radio off, but so you've still got sound on the intercom, I'll leave the radio on here. It is technically protected from surges, but we'll turn off the strobe lights, the landing lights. We'll check ignition 1, and there's a drop of about 100 RPM. Check ignition number 2, similarly a drop. And then one thing you don't do is switch off both at the same time. Rotax requires switching off one first, make sure the throttle is absolute minimum, and then the second one. And the engine will stop much more smoothly and gently when you switch off one at a time. Okay, that finishes our pre-delivery flight check for Foxbat 8624, and I would say that's passed, no problem at all.